Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. Last week, we suggested that it is our mothers who deserve the credit, and yet we celebrate our own birthdays and we get all the attention. Our mothers did all the work, and yet, we look at ourselves when we celebrate our own birthdays. And we might think that, like other schools of Buddhism, that we are the ones who awaken to our own spiritual birth, our birth in the Pure Land. And yet, it comes from others. The larger sutra tells us that it is Amida Buddha that is the cause of our spiritual birth, our birth in the Pure Land. And if we relate our own biological birth to that of our spiritual birth, we see that it is the efforts of others. If Amida Buddha is too abstract, we might just place instead the efforts of others, meaning our parents, elders, relatives, masters. Most significantly, our mothers, or Oya-sama, represents our spiritual parent, Amida Buddha, who is a loving, wise, and compassionate parent. I think it's significant that Siddhartha Gautama lost his mother in this first week of life. And also, Shinran and Renyo lost their mothers early in life, about the 7th or 8th year of their lives. They were separated from their mothers. And so I'm wondering if not having a mother early on in their life, this may have been an impetus for them to search for a spiritual meaning. Most of us have been fortunate to have our mothers and fathers who helped nurture us. I know as I grew and matured, my parents gave me a lot of support. And yet, did I listen to them? Even as an adult, I sometimes reverted back to my teenage rebellious years. When my mother would say something, I would think that, I was right, and I really wouldn't listen to her. Psychologists tell us that sometimes we're stuck in these early years, and that when we're under stress, we revert back, and that we act out of this thought that we're right, and our parents who have much more experience are not. This is why you may have experienced that when someone says something in particular, they push certain buttons. Well, what's happening is that we revert back to these early years and we're activated to act out in the way that we did in childhood. This may have worked for many years as a young person, but as an adult, we should realize that it doesn't work. This happens when we're stressed out. And what is happening today? I think we're stressed. We're in this COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us, of course, are staying home. Some have lost jobs. We're unsure of the future. We're all stressed out. So how can Buddhism help us? Of course, there's meditation. This is a process whereby we can be at one with our physical bodies, our thoughts, our heart, and our spiritual nature. We're at peace at one, in oneness in the now. So meditation can help us. Also, Shinran's teachings, which I'll talk about next week in our Gotan-e service that we have. This will help us as we understand that we are accepted just as we are. Today, I want to talk about who to listen to. We have many voices talking to us. We're wondering who's right. Mother's Day reminds me that I troubled my mother. I thought I was right with my limited experience, and I sometimes didn't listen to her. The Buddha advised us not to take any teachings, even his own, without testing. Now, that's very important because we, right now, get advice from many different sources. Who do we listen to? How do we test it out? We must rely on experts, those with real experience. Our doctors and scientists are telling us to stay at home. The virus is transmitted person to person and is very contagious. And I think San Diego has a low rate of infection and death compared to many other areas because we have been working under this thought of separation. And so until we have adequate testing, we have no way of knowing who has the virus, who's contagious, and so we can affect others without even knowing it. The federal government has been very ineffective and inept in providing adequate testing and supplies needed for testing. So we won't know who has the virus and who passes it on. So we have to assume that any person can have that. So to protect all of us, it's best to remain separate. And this is what my talk is about today. Because even this opening up locally means that there may be other people coming from out of state in many other areas who have this virus, who may pass it on. And we won't know until we have this damaging illness. Now, I'm familiar with this, and let me give you an analogy of it. As a dentist, I had a similar situation on a daily basis. We had many patients who would come in, they would have an oral exam, we would take some x-rays, which was like a test. And if we saw a small area of decay, we could remove it and replace it with a filling. Now, this dental treatment for an exam, a test, dental x-rays, and a filling may cost hundreds of dollars, and hopefully very little pain. And yet there are many other patients who didn't quite listen to this. They came in infrequently, only when they had a problem. And that meant that the decay had gone much deeper, perhaps to their nerve, or part of a tooth may have broken off. So that would require that I might have to do a root canal and crown, or do an extraction and replace the space with a bridge or an implant. Of course, this would take many appointments and cost thousands of dollars. And they would complain that dentistry was very expensive. No, that wasn't correct. Ignorance and neglect was expensive. Similarly, if we don't have enough tests, it's like having a patient come in, looking into their mouth and not taking x-rays, not having a test to detect something when it was very small. Now, there's a difference here, of course. We wouldn't like a toothache, but here the virus, if we don't know who has it, can be lethal. It damages our lungs and can cause death. And so I would inform all of my patients on what to do to keep dental health. Some would listen and some would not. Some would ignore my advice. And I think this is what is happening now. We have advice from medical experts, and yet many people are ignoring that advice and listening to others. It's like being a teenager, being pent up for some 6 or 7 weeks, wanting to get out, just being rebellious, not knowing the dangers that it represents. And so I really want to emphasize the point that we listen to these experts and stay at home as much as possible, follow all the instructions that they've given us, because they understand the great damage that this virus can do once we're infected. And of course, if we are infected, it's a little late and it should be caught at an earlier stage by testing. So who do we believe when we hear these things? I think we should believe the medical experts and scientists. And it's a consensus. It's a team of people who really understand and have the experience to know what this is. We shouldn't be like teenagers who have a limited view and just go on our feelings. But for the sake of others, for the sake of yourself, please endure this isolation a little longer. Listen to the health professionals for their advice on when it's safe to go out. And when we do, please take all the precautions of using a mask, staying as separate as possible, washing your hands. Now, there's a broader question here, because I think some people may be questioning, what is the role of religion today? Is it just something we believe, or is it something that really helps our life? I think if we consider Buddhism, we must realize that it's been around for 2,500 years. It's been in many, many countries and altered their culture and the country itself. It has been proven through scientific and history that it works. The tenets and principles of Buddhism are based on things that happen in life. We see that everything changes. We see that we are all interconnected. And the advice given by the Buddha works, and we should adhere to this. So please listen. We have all the advice taken over the centuries from our 7 masters and Shinran, Renyo, and the many talented ministers in BCA. So for this, there may bring up many questions, and so we are hoping to change the format of our Buddhism 1, 2, 3 on Wednesday nights so that we might be able to take questions and answers at the end or during the session. And I want to thank Bill Teague, who is the one who does all the technical things with these videos. I just record this, and Bill has the hard task of putting it online, putting up all the graphics and things like that. I also want to thank the mother of my sons, Karen, who is our videographer, who is taking these. So in terms of the COVID pandemic, please contact the temple or myself if anyone needs any assistance. In addition, we do have a request. The temple has been closed for weeks and will remain so, with no service nor activities. We have had to cancel our fundraisers. And so if you're able to, we are open to any donations because our maintenance of the temple goes on. So if you're able to, please, we are open to accepting any donation. And with that, please join me in expressing our deepest appreciation for the teachings which guide us through this life. Thank you. Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.